play this. I'm going to play the intro. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Boom. So, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Your video feels a little slow,
Oh,
but I'm a little bit slow today.
so
I may
nice.
look like I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but I'm not.
Okay.
But Christina Strutt has been one of those that are coming on now so often, and for Soulogy, you're one of, I don't even know, hundreds, thousands of particularly women that have been quiet, in the background, reserved. I don't even have to ask you, doing your part on an individual basis to anchor, grid work, elevate, share code, and so on, quietly, in anonymity primarily. And so I just want to say to you and those like you, thank you, because I don't even know how we ended up here. I just know that you'd sent a contribution, and you've always been very loving and supportive, and also contributed when you could and stuff, and it's very much appreciated. But I don't know if I asked you or you asked me. I think I asked you, and then you just told me right now before we went on that there's a very special reason that you're coming on. So I'm all ears.
Well, the thought began because you and Morgan, made an invitation to women to talk about their hero's journey kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and about awakening and so on. But the real reason I wanted to talk with you is because first I thought it would be great fun. So much fun watching you over the years. By the way, when did you leave Hawaii? Because that's when I first knew you, was right
We
before.
left. We actually arrived on the mainland on Lionsgate, 2019, 8/8,
Okay, so it was the year before
in
that then.
Terminal 5D, by the way.
Okay. It
So
was probably 2018 when I discovered you somehow. And
2018, yeah, 28.
yeah.
The summer of 2018 is when it really took off. So we were probably at like 300 shows. We're at 3,000 now, but it was probably. And Morgan came over for the second time after 9 months from the first time, and then that's what the summer that we had the Divine Union ceremony, which was just a spontaneous, typical organic thing. But yeah, so that's when it really started to take off. She took over the kind of a producing role, directing role, as far as taking that off my plate. And that's when it really just exploded. We were doing,
Right.
I think that from probably that second half of the year, 2018, we probably did about 90 to 100 shows a month. There were some days we were doing 5 and 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I knew it'd be a lot of fun because I've watched you do so many interviews, and you're very thoughtful, you listen beautifully, and you ask the greatest questions.
Mm.
And I love that because that's my favorite thing to do: listen, reflect, ask questions. And I love being asked questions. So here's the thing. You're right about me being reserved and very quiet,
Mm.
because I don't even feel like I had an awakening experience. But what's happened for me is like this helical life in front of me, responding to life. I mean, I'm 69 years old, and I have always known that love is everything.
Mm.
Without words necessarily, without even knowing what that means. As far back as I remember, like age 2, I can remember just knowing that. And the big picture is that because of that, I feel I've carried so much grief. And the grief isn't about the horrible things that are happening, but the grief is more about it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And that's kind of been the story of my life. So I don't really know where you want me to begin, but I figured you would ask me questions we can explore this.
It's never what we think, right? No, I'm just kidding. No,
Well,
I'll be happy to.
and maybe at the end of it, it's like I'm full of shit that I'm really not awake. You know what I'm saying?
Well, see, this is what we're looking for.
What? I'm ordinary, so it's like.
But that's it. That the ordinary is the extraordinary, and what I love, and we're seeing more of it. I think not just in the Soulogy platform, but in general. And maybe I'm assuming that, but I got to believe that. So what it is, it's this combination of, and it's not just women. I mean, it's primarily coming up in them because they carry to a greater probability, or not to a greater reality. They tend to carry more of the feminine energy, just like a masculine incarnate, typically, not always, and that's changing rapidly too. We have to say that there's a lot of androgynous energy manifesting before all of our eyes. But so what I see, the way I see it is this: I see it as a whether they're out there or more like you, which most of them are more like you, they're obviously connected in a very obvious way, but they're also very down to earth, and I find that remarkable because it says a lot to what one of the primary characteristics of what I would call the mother goddess energy. And I think a lot of people can look at their families or look at a family that they know of or a woman that they know of. I think of my grandmother, and she just was the rock of a very large family. But she did it in a way that was, just quiet, that just did it as, it was beyond duty. It was just innate. And so I think that's coming out. So when I see someone like you and then make a joke like you just make, that says it all to me right there.
So yeah, as you described that, here's what I've been thinking. It's like so I got to make a confession first. I call you and all these wonderful people who work with energy and do downloads and all that language, which I don't use because I don't even know what exactly that means. I just face life in front of me and do stuff that I know is based in love. But I call that woo-woo. So when I am with my family, friends, colleagues, community, whatever, I usually say, okay, so I need to share something woo-woo. So that kind of tunes them in to listen in a different way, because everyone thinks I'm weird. So I feel like I'm too weird to be normal and too normal to kind of fit in with the sort of spiritual community. And I've never fit in. I've never. So maybe that's where I'll begin. I felt like an iceberg. So when I said to you how I have always known that love is the answer, that's the immersed part of the iceberg. And all that's been seen above the water has been that being translated through my body into whatever was in front of me. So, I just want to show you this briefly. You're not going to be able to read it on me, but what I did about 4 years ago, and it came out in a matter of 5 minutes before I was joining a group of women who'd invited me, a group we call co-creators. And we've been in dialogue every other week for 4 years now. But it just came out like literally minutes before as a way of describing who I am. So you're not going to be able to see it, but it's a helical picture.
Hang on,
You know,
let me blow it up.
Well, you're not going to be able to read it all, but it's from birth. Each helical spiral, kind of felt like it was going down, but in fact was pulling me back and then catapulting me up. So I did it on a piece of scrap paper, and then I've done another one for the last 4 years, but the details aren't important. I wanted to show you that just as an example of how I feel my journey has been. It's not been any one huge thing, like an awakening thing. But what has been happening is that knowing in my belly that love is everything has come up through my body and been expressed in everything I've done. But I haven't been able to articulate it till I've lived it for a long time. And then I talk about it or write about it. So even if you give me a book to read, a spiritual book of some kind, I don't really care about what it's saying if I can't apply it in practical daily life today.
Right.
To myself as a suburbanite living outside of Boston. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a neighbor, a friend, a community member, But I love people, and I've always been curious. Curiosity, I'd say, is the biggest thing. So I don't even know where to begin, Todd. I mean, it's like I grew up, I've lived in 4 different countries. In every country, I've been the minority from birth, And so I've become a very good observer of people and curious about people, which is what people do when you're outside of the system, I'm not even talking about being a woman, there's a whole bunch of layers of culture and ethnicity that's been very interesting for me. So I guess, yeah, from age, I would say my memory goes back to age 2. So I don't know. Where do you want me to begin?
Yeah, that was a good beginning.
12 hours,
Well, if I'm understanding you correctly, and I believe I am, well, a lot like Cooley, who was just on and said, I don't have spirit guides. I don't, all that stuff doesn't happen. It's just this, what do you call it? Claire something, where you just know something, right? But yours seems to even be a little bit of a different slant. It's interesting because everything is either practical and able to be practically applied to the living moment, or it's not any use to you. And I like that because
the other thing around in the field, I don't discard it. Everything is kind of there. Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you. Do you want?
No, you didn't. No, you just go ahead.
So actually, that you see, this is what happens when you talk to me like this. Something drops in. So I've got the whole field back here, and I'm kind of relying on you and our dialogue to see what needs to be said now. What is the most useful, valuable things to talk about. So when you said that, I realized that a huge thing for me was discovering the metaphor, the ancient Vedic metaphor that's like 4,500 years old, of Indra's net of jewels. Indra's net of jewels, the great god Indra, created the universe, by artfully stringing. Is this something you've heard of? Or maybe I should.
No, keep going. I want to hear it.
It's the great god Indra. It's in one of the Vedas, the Atharva Veda, I think, where it's described as he created the multiverse by stringing this net of jewels, infinite net of jewels in every direction, in infinitely every dimension you can imagine. And at every node in this net, he hung a jewel. And the jewel was so artfully faceted that it reflected every other jewel in the entire net. And so the metaphor is of oneness for me. And it was such a concrete metaphor. In fact, if anybody wants to get a visual of it, there was a movie called The Wisdom Tree. It's quite an old movie, 2013, I think. And if you look at the official trailer, and just watch the first 33 seconds. There's a beautiful visual of this net of jewels. But anyway, so each of us is this uniquely faceted jewel, and we are the relationships between each other, every relationship, and we are a fractal of everything because we're a reflection of everything, and we are the net itself. So when I said I've always known that love is everything, it's felt like I've been swimming in this ocean or having this field and net all around me. And as I grew and had life experiences, specific things came out and got done. So, and it was only like a couple of years ago 3 years ago, when I discovered this metaphor from, of all people, a friend of mine who's a quantum physicist who told me about it. And I thought, it's like, how come I've never heard of this, given my Indian ethnicity even, and the fact that my middle name is Indra Rani, which is Queen of the Goddesses. So it's like, wow, why have I not even heard of this? So when I use the term Indra's Net, and I've convened gatherings and stuff in a local cafe, just people off the street, no particular spiritual path or anything needed, just to be together in that way, in love. And lots of tears, and I've really grown a lot from doing things like that. But I guess it's like, for me, more about the spaces in between than doing things. So if I back up a little bit through a series of events, I mean, my parents lived through World War II. So both of them, my father he was in Singapore, he worked for the Japanese occupiers before he was a little older than my mother. My mother didn't quite finish high school because of the Japanese occupation. She was in Malaya at the time. And so I was born, I don't know, 5 years after the end of the war, 6 years, something like that. And so they were rebuilding that area. And I actually ended up living in England from age 2 to age 5 because my father got a scholarship to study civil engineering. So you can imagine this little Indian bunny, walking around in Brighton in the UK. And actually, it was an amazing experience because, again, it's post-war and all of that. But I remember my mother holding my hand, walking down the street. My brother was older and he went to school. And this child came by with his mother. And I remember distinctly hearing it. The child said, "Look, Mama, walking, talking gollywog." And my mother laughed. I remember that. And it was like my experiences, and even those kinds of things for me were just all curiosity, knowing people in different countries, being different in a country, like that. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's like those experiences. And then when I came back to Malaysia and moved to Singapore, I think that's when I really was able to put into practice a lot of the field thing about love. Because Singapore, and when I say Singapore, I almost hesitate to say it because it's nothing then like it is today. So I'm talking about the late 50s into the 60s and growing up K through 12. It was a country that truly lived egalitarian principles. We were originally part of Malaysia. And actually, the Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, after 9 months or so, I've probably lost the details, but he broke away because he wanted the country to be egalitarian, no matter the proportion of different races. So Singapore was predominantly Chinese. The rest of Malaysia was predominantly Malay, and it was becoming a Malay Muslim country. But Singapore was an egalitarian country. So even though the Indian origin people were a small percentage, and the Malays were a smaller percentage, everyone was treated equally. Just to give you one example, the major religions were each given 3 public holidays or 2 public holidays: so Christianity, Islam, the Chinese, and Hinduism.
This is in Singapore.
This is Singapore in the 50s and 60s, yeah.
Wow.
And it's still like that.
That was very progressive. Well, I knew that it was progressive. I didn't realize it went back that far.
Well, but people see it as in so many different ways. I mean,
no, I think it's I'm in fact, I can't really think of another place like that,
Yeah, well,
of that size
right.
that has the energy that it has, and I think everybody knows that. It's kind of like a standalone, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and it's a tiny little island. And at the time when we broke away from Malaysia, I remember the prime minister, doing a broadcast and saying that we have to rely on each other. We don't have any natural resources. We were essentially a harbor, a port, one of the largest ports in the world at the time. And so the people and the connections and the community building was really important. So I mean, I'm not saying anything was perfect. There was lots of other things going on as well. But I think I've always felt that he had tears in his eyes when he was saying that, because he knew it was going to be hard to survive. But we did. The country had several 10-year plans and implemented them. The first was housing people. Housing people. Then there was education. There was you know, information structure. I mean, all kinds of things began to happen. But anyway, so that was like me feeling, oh, this is what love is about. It doesn't matter what you look on the outside. We are equal. We respect each other. We respect each other's customs. So I know this doesn't sound very spiritual or awake or whatever.
It's very spiritual.
But
In
it's,
fact, I'm a history
yeah,
buff, or I used to be, until I stopped reading. But I still play around on YouTube, but I never knew this. I never knew the depth of the story behind it. I didn't know that. I've always known that it was like Morocco was back in the day. I mean, not that it was a religious, egalitarian kind of society, but that it was this mix where all were welcome, basically, and you could find
right.
all kinds of different things. But I didn't know that. It's very interesting. Did you live in Singapore as an adult?
No, I did not. See, again, I was in England for those 3 years and then moved to Singapore at kindergarten or
Hmm.
first grade age. And then I got this scholarship. And again, that was like a miracle to go to university in England to do computer science. Now I'm talking 1970, 1969.
Good
And there
gosh.
were
Did they even
very,
have
very,
that then?
no, very few
I never saw
universities.
one. I never saw one until would have been 1975.
Well, that's sort of what's fascinating, Todd. I mean, it's like I was pretty smart. I mean, school, math and the thinking, and that's what the family culture was all about. My parents raised me very much to get educated and go off and do something with my life. But no, there were no computers, and I remember being president of the Math Society or something and wanting to bring computers in. And the only thing I could find in Singapore at the time was Olivetti, which was an Italian company. And all it really was glorified typewriters. That's all they really were, computerized typewriters. But they came and demonstrated and all of that. Anyway, so my brother had already gone off to England. He was pretty smart. And I got this scholarship because he sent me information that Barclays Bank in England was giving away 10 scholarships to study computer science in England. Now, why they ended up giving it to me, I have no idea. This is the kind of the miraculous things that happen. It's like the other 9 were all English, and I was this one person from overseas. It was very strange. But anyway, so I started working for a company that was founded in the US, here in Maynard, Massachusetts. He was a Quaker, and it was a company that was pioneering mainframe and mini computers, Digital Equipment Corporation, that no one has heard of today because it basically blew up in the early 90s when they kicked out the founder, but it was taken over by Compaq and then HP. So the way I
Mhm.
see it is all these people who grew up on these Quaker values and family values. I was very fortunate, I feel,
That's
to
it.
have joined that.
That's just stop there for 1 second, because I don't think most people don't realize the energy of the Quakers. I mean, these were people that were very, they were obviously very, what do you want to say, like soul family oriented. They had strong convictions. They were not uh, religious extremists in the sense of trying to throw their values on other people. And to me, the greatest example of their energy and their attributes were they obviously dressed different. Now we're going back to the 1800s, even the early 1900s, and people made a lot of fun of them.
Yeah.
And they were mean to them, but they had this thing where they would always just smile at you. No matter what happened, they wouldn't strike back. They would just smile at you. Almost some people might look at it and go, they're a little bit off, like mentally afflicted or something, but that was their devotion in action, embodiment. Yeah. So that was a big influence on you as well.
Yeah, it was very much, I mean, it is a business, so but I think the whole notion of presence and respect for each other, no matter what position, of course, there was a hierarchy in the company, but it was like open door, everybody was to be respected. And I know it sounds like a cliche now, but back then it really meant a lot to us, the phrase, do the right thing. And what that meant was be responsible, not just to myself in my particular job, but to the whole of this family, It was, I feel so grateful that I got into a company like that. I joined in England because they had just established a small software engineering group in England. An American manager had gone over, and I was like the fifth hire, the first college hire, only a woman, of course. So my whole career in tech was, pretty much in the minority. And
minority, how about double minority, or maybe even triple minority?
Well, yeah,
Really?
because I had this weird thing that love is the answer, but I never said that word until I'd been with the company probably 15 years. And even then, when I did put it into a report that kind of got spread around the company.
You put it in a corporate report.
I actually used it in a report, the word
Wow.
love, in 1991, I think it was.
Wow,
maybe
impressive.
90. And the guys I was working with, well, the group I was in was a product management group. And I remember the guys saying to me, "What's wrong with you? We thought we'd kick that shit out of you a long time ago." So half joking, I love these guys and they love me, but it was still very weird, you know?
Many a true word spoken in jest.
Yeah. But this whole thing of being undercover. So the iceberg is one way I have made sense of it to myself,
That's a really great analogy, because I just got what you're saying. Because if you look at an iceberg, a very small portion of it's above the water, and a giant.
Exactly. But and it's like being undercover, and it wasn't conscious, you see, Todd. I feel as if I was being let out bit by bit by bit somehow in the appropriate time, I have this weird process where I know what to do and I go and do it. I don't even know why, but the steps just show up. And it takes quite a long time of living and doing it before I can even talk about it or write about it. So you can imagine the dilemma sometimes of explaining it in a corporate environment, what needs to be done, So just to give you one example, because the majority of my work after moving to the States, they wanted both me and my husband. We met at university, so he is also in tech. And we've been married almost 46 years together, nearly 50 years.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
It's a ride when you've been married that long.
Well, especially the last 10 years. That's what blows my mind. People that came into the Ascension period, pre-2012, and then, have been had like the lady yesterday, I think it was 40 years, but yeah, that's impressive.
But he really doesn't read or follow any of the woo stuff. And yet he's intuitive. So we talk. I mean, he gets it at a level that's different, right? And in fact, he's still working. I mean, he got laid off a long time ago, and it sort of changed our lives, no income for a few years and all that, with kid in college and a mortgage, all the rest of it. That was right after 9/11 that happened. But he and a couple of colleagues got together with a small consulting company, and they're still going. They're all getting old, like 70-ish, but they're still going. But here's what he does. He really is a networking specialist, and he works on the health of the internet. I kind of work on the health of Indra's net. myself and everybody around me. And he works on the health of the internet. So
You work on the health what?
of the Indra's net, I said, which is the unseen field.
I got you.
It's
And then
presence
okay.
and putting the love out there, knowing that every thought, every second is putting these lights out there, bursts of electricity, light, whatever you want to call it. But I'm saying that that's kind of where we meet in the middle. It's like he's about the outer net and I'm about the inner net, Indra's net and internet. So we do, and also we have our computing background, so we understand each other. And then so much of this stuff is now you're using operating systems and, downloads and programming and, it just makes complete sense.
It's funny how you guys are like reflections of the collective, the intranet and the internet, like
That's
the
right.
manifestation of the intranet. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, mind you, it's a very noisy household. I mean, it's like, how do you put those two together? They've been coming together, and there's more work to be done. But so the thing I wanted to tell you about as an example of the iceberg thing. So the major assignment I had, which started in around 88, and went on through I quit the company in the late 90s, was moving a whole division, the networking division, which is where my husband worked, and I was also in that, from what I call component thinking, build a product, sell it, build a product, sell it, build a product, sell it, to systems thinking, customers wanting to buy products, have it all work as a system. Now can you see that immediately the Indra's net, the spaces between become really, really important.
Turnkey instead of piecemeal.
Yeah, but all these relationships need to work. So my life really has been all about relationship in so many different levels, dimensions, places, but it's always boils down to love and relationship. So it's like, and also customers at that time wanted to buy things from other companies, and put it in with Digital Equipment Corporation products, and it should all work. So anyway, how do you show people that the spaces in between are important? How do you show people who've always just focused on designing and building software products to start paying attention to, spaces in between, the product working with the other product, this group working with that group, this company working with another company, So it's all about relationship. And as you know, Newtonian thinking is all about breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down. And then if you understand the detail at the very finest level, you understand the whole. Well, no.
That's like see the trees and not the forest, right?
Well, exactly. And then, systems thinking came along and, which is looking at the relationships. I mean, Cartesian thinking really missed the fact that relationships change the whole, right? So, so relationship went from nothing important to something important to it's everything when you go to quantum and spiritual work. Relationship is everything. There are no things. So if there are things, they are things that are ephemeral in the second, in this moment, but they're constantly changing. What is constant is the relationship, the actual net, the field, call it what you will. So anyway, how do you do that? Well, for a year or so, I was running these project reviews and gathering data as to what was going wrong, all the problems and so on. And I was just about to sit down with all that data and analyze it when my father got very ill. And basically, my husband and my two young children, I had a 15-month-old and a 4-year-old at the time, we just picked up and left, went back to Malaysia. The doctors had given him 6 weeks to live, and he ended up living 5 months, but he was deteriorating all that time. He had seizures, and then he'd ended up being bedridden. So the company, talk about Quaker values, the company gave me a leave of absence just like that, to be with my father, stay
That's
with
unheard
my
of.
children. Yeah.
That's unheard of.
So this was 1988. And so I was there with my children. My husband came back to work, obviously he had to return, and taking care of my father with my mother. There wasn't home help or anything like that. I had a cousin who was a doctor, and he would drop in every couple of days to check in on my dad. And but it was a long, long day for me. 2 little children, and my mom and my father. We were doing everything. everything that a nurse would do on the bedside. And talk about, yeah, and one time I remember somebody called me from work. I had one phone call. In those days, there was no, texting, cell phones, nothing, just, and they were chatting to me. And I said, you know what? I said, sometimes I feel all I'm doing is cleaning up poop. There's my father's poop. There's my 4-year-old who can't quite clean his butt yet. And then there's my 15-month-old in diapers. But I had taken all that data with me. I'd thrown it into my case. And every night, like 11 o'clock onwards, I would sit with that project review data, which I'd gathered over a year. And as a result of that, it sort of saved my life in a way, because it was like picking me up out of my home and my environment here in Westford, Massachusetts, and suddenly I'm in Malaysia, um, familiar and not familiar. It's a strange life I've lived because,
I
crossing
think
over.
it's a beautiful open book, and this whole thing with the intranet, the cosmic web. I'll just put it that way. The connectivity
That's right.
is I often think to myself, what's going on here, as we all do.
Yeah.
And I get so really exhausted even in this moment with the over analyzation, this breaking down that you're talking about, where we spend all our time with these trees and we don't see the forest, because if we look at the forest, we will see the connectivity as well as our pulsation throughout it, so that we will be conscious, responsible creators and handle our own shit, basically.
Yes.
And grow up.
Yes.
And not throw shit out into the cosmic web. Now, what I find so fascinating about what you're saying is, through the efforts that we've all been a part of, and I think you and your husband are like you're like the perfect example, right? It's not even about learning anything. It's about stopping all the noise and just looking at the connectivity, looking at the veins and the arteries that connect everything, the roots, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, to me, as you're telling this story, is the seed of wisdom from it, is just to look at the connectivity and see the repercussions and the ripples that we have. And maybe that's what it is. We go from unconscious creators to conscious, responsible creators. That is not just a gift in my eyes. That is the ultimate, to be God, goddess, and to be in the flesh and do it.
Right.
I mean, this is so many things telling us that's not possible. That's not, you know what I mean? And then here you are telling a story about wiping up poop all day, and there it is.
And what you described as, sort of settling into that place, that is the place where you feel the cosmic web. You feel that is when you are the presence. And I think because I had such long days and was so exhausted by 11 o'clock at night, yet I couldn't sleep. And I knew I needed to do something different to, first of all, keep my sanity, and also just have something that was my own after everyone else had gone to bed, I just sat with all that data. And as a result of that, I wrote a report, which gave 12 different areas, what the problem was, what the symptoms were, what needed to be done. But it was all knit together. I don't know how I did that. That had to be, to use one of your words, a download. It had to be a download.
Well, I think it's your well, this is just my opinion, but your innate, everyone has specialties, plural. We're not that singular, in the sense of our abilities. We know this, but there's certainly certain, in this incarnation, certain specialties, and you seem to have an innate relationship or connection, for lack of a better word, or understanding or awareness, a pre-awareness of this intranet.
Right.
So I think by virtue of that, anything that you really want or any pieces that you're trying to put together. I think it sounds like it's a very natural, I want to say phenomena from the human perspective, but it's a very natural phenomena for you, because you can see the space between point A and point B, and that you don't have to build that neural pathway. It's there, and that's all you. I mean, there's so much wisdom in what you're saying, because the chase is over. I hear from your story. It's just look at it. Look at the byways and the highways between myself and all other points in the cosmic web. And I think your story is understood for me, is told in the space between the words, which is another copy of what you represent.
The spaces in between. So, but I don't want to paint a picture like, it's all sweetness and light. It's not at all. I mean, I really.
Okay, this show's over.
I mean, I'm so full of shit in that way. I mean, in a lifetime getting to a place where I include myself in that net. This journey to self-love. I mean, I really have done stuff at the expense of me. Why? Because of what I was marinated in growing up, culturally, to some extent, being a woman of Indian descent. My grandparents are from Sri Lanka, but we're Tamil, which is a southern Indian. That's my language. And but more than that, I mean, I think, I don't know. My father and mother were pretty strict. My father was very strict, and it was unusual. Don't think that's how my cousins and other people grew up. It was a very strict household, very restricted. So something in me got hyper responsible, and that's been my journey. That responsibility thing, because I think my body is, had a lot of breaking points, including cancer and broken bones, and because it's like I just keep going because I can do it, pushing myself. And the last 3 or 4 years has really been a journey to self-love in that way. But I just wanted to talk about the sweetness and light. I just wanted to finish that story about, okay, so when my father passed away and I returned to work, and then I had this report. Now, how do you sell it to people, right? Because they're all thinking that they're doing just fine, whatever. So it was kind of hard, but this is where this net thing comes in. I think I just knew it was possible. And it's also where the grief comes in, because I know and I can feel it. I can feel how much smoother things could flow if there was more attention to the spaces in between, at that level. I'm talking about networks engineering at Digital Equipment Corporation, but I had people saying, no, it can't be done. This is always the way we've done it and always has to be. And I remember saying to the senior manager, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean it can't change, And another guy who was actually he was the technical director of the whole division. When I had my meeting with him to talk about this report, he took great pleasure in digging it out of the trash can to talk to me about it. So that's the kind of environment that I was in. So I somehow have been led to or found environments where a lot of resilience and strength had to be built. But in that process, somehow lost myself. When you're so much about the spaces, so much about the empathy, so much about helping, serving, whatever. So I'm not saying that in any way to be proud of it. I'm just saying that was my Achilles heel, And so the journey to wholeness has been the divine feminine arising and stepping up my peaceful warrior to stand up for myself. And, it was probably only, I don't know, it's again, these things happen in layers, maybe 10 years ago, and then again, 3, 4 years ago, it sort of dawned on me, just because I'm good at doing something, really, really good, getting things done, organized, blah, blah, I can do it all, doesn't mean I have to do it.
That's right. Yeah. 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 I think I can relate to that because of my past corporate, my corporate life where, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and you're doing it at the expense of yourself. And
Right.
because I don't know, it's almost like a micromanaging, even though I wouldn't say I was a micromanager. It didn't sound like you were, but there's this thing about getting it done, doing it right, making sure every rock's turned over. And there is a loss that is also a gift, because if you don't lose it, you don't have anything to
Exactly.
find.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm
But the
super
other thing, the
grateful.
other thing that really stands out, uh, and again, it's the space between the lines. Like, I don't know what happened these last 4 years, but the few words that you mentioned about it, okay. But what I'm getting is what I'm seeing in myself and other people, and that is to, I guess I'm going to try to, you know, try to describe it. It'll be futile, but and that is to be 100% confident in the purity of your soul and your intentions,
Mhm, mhm,
because this whole realm is full of things, and your microcosmic example of your life and in that work environment is a perfect example. And that is, there's all these things telling you what you should do, how you should do it, what's wrong with you, and
mhm,
so on. And that's not my shit.
mhm, mhm,
Okay. I can take it on if I want to, but
mhm.
I feel like that what's happening to people is they're doing what you're taught, what evidently has really come to the surface for you in the last 4 years, and that is to be comfortable in their innocence and in their
Right,
purity and in their curiosity, and don't look back.
right.
Because not only, through your story, it's it's so amazing to be able to see the visual, but through your story to see the byways and the highways and the routes and the roads and the streets, these cosmic neural pathways, but to actually get on them and start traveling them.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what the space between the words that you speak are showing me, or affirming to me, is to keep going. We're
Mhm,
all travelers,
mhm.
right? And so, how can you walk a road that you can't see? Number one, and number two, back to the 16-hour work days. Why go build roads that are already there? You see what I
Right,
mean?
right,
So, so it's to me, like talking to you today is like a presentation of the road that's been there that we haven't seen. It's, you could even call it new code, but it's really not new code. It's more like somebody gave us daytime, not instead of nighttime vision goggles or glasses, it's daytime vision glasses, because
right,
it it blocks out the illusion of this darkness
right,
that
right,
has kept us from seeing that everywhere we step there's a road,
right.
you know.
And that's making the invisible visible is
Yeah.
really a lot of what I've been doing. I remember drawing charts for these engineers. Normally you draw an org chart, you've got these boxes for the different organizations and then the lines in between as to how they interact with each other. So I would draw charts without the boxes, almost like a film negative, to emphasize the relationships and the flows
Hmm.
without drawing the box around the organization, you know, things like that. But it is really, yeah. And but here's, I think, one of the reasons why I did push myself so hard, Todd. Remember, we're talking, my high tech career was like from 1973 to I
God.
quit in I quit in 98 or something. And then consulted for a while and then quit everything, and that's another story. But I've lost my thread.
That's okay. It happens in the ascension. It happens in the ascension.
Oh
um
God, I've totally forgotten what I was gonna say. Um, Oh, a different time. It was a different time. So the reason I was exhausted because I knew that if I didn't produce concrete results in parallel with this undercover iceberg work I was doing, I would not be there. I
Hmm.
would, I mean, not that I was afraid of losing my job, but I wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
It's like a stealth operation, you know? For example, I brought in this whole technology. So the whole systems thinking thing that I'd been doing for a few years. And then suddenly a person from the company in England sent me this email saying, Chris, you should look at this book called The Fifth Discipline. There's this guy called Peter Senge from MIT who's done this whole thing on systems thinking, and you would love this book. And I probably wouldn't have read it if I hadn't been got flu or something, and then I had a couple of days in bed, and I had bought it and I read it. And I thought, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm doing. So it was like having that helped the work a lot. But do you know what I'm saying? It's like people are always looking for the concrete
Yeah.
evidence.
Yeah.
So I was an influencer. I never had a position of hierarchy at all, because where do you put me? Where do you put someone who holds the field? You know,
That's the mother energy. That's the
but
mother.
it,
The mother
but it
energy
was
is the space between, right?
exactly, and the growth I had to do as a woman, as a
Hmm.
physical body,
Hmm.
was into balancing that with the father energy. The
Hmm.
masculine energy. It says enough, okay. It's like,
Say that again. So
well,
the father energy says enough, as in.
it says protecting me too,
Mhm.
not using me up so completely. I mean, for instance, and I don't regret anything I did, Todd. I don't want you to hear any whining in any of this. I am just so amazed and so grateful when I look back at all of this.
It comes
But for
through
example,
it comes through loud and clear. You don't have to worry about that.
when my first son was born, 1983, I mean, I literally, maybe this counts as a woo-woo experience. I literally felt that someone had cracked my heart open. It was a physical pain,
Hmm.
so painful when they placed him on my chest. So somehow I think armor that had been put in place in my childhood, which you could call abusive in many ways, physically, financially, emotionally abusive, something cracked when this child was placed on me.
Hmm.
And something from, it's like, along with that, somehow protecting my children. They knew I loved my work. I didn't want them to go to after school care. And that was the time when I was really caught in between two worlds. I mean, talk about living in a suburban town, a beautiful town, which I still live in. I've lived here 40 years in this home, where mostly was stay-at-home moms. Or if they weren't
No, yeah,
stay-at-home
there
moms,
was no latchkey kid back in
no,
those days, right?
either they were stay-at-home or they were about to go back to work because the kids had started school or something part-time. They were going to go back to work. So I was an anomaly in my neighborhood. And then at work, I was an anomaly as well because I worked flex time, flex place. I had a couple of very enlightened managers, God bless them. And I still see them sometimes. Recently, one guy lives in Ohio and he came up and we had dinner together with his wife and who had foresight, who set me up at home, with a computer and a modem
Smart,
so I
smart
could
guy, smart guy. You know,
yeah.
there's that old adage in the corporate world that the best managers are the ones that hire people as good or better than they are.
And the downside of it was my super hyper responsibility kicked into full mode, right? Working 16-hour days,
Mm.
because, so anyway, it's all, I don't know, Todd, I don't know if this is where you wanted the conversation, if it's
I,
helpful or
you
not,
know,
but
I couldn't have asked for a better transmission. Seriously, I mean, and it's really, and it's, maybe people think I'm exaggerating, but literally the last show was the best show. It
hmm,
just seems like the last show that I've done is the best show ever, and so I think that says something about this space between the space between that you represent, and actually have verbalized for the first time I've really heard it in this manner, because it's a demonstration of it. It's not the words, although the words kind of affirm it, for that part of us that has to have the, or like you were talking about.
Yeah,
But
which is
yeah, I love what
it's
you said too about that having to, I guess, have the proof. Because I remember hearing 10 years ago when it started for me, we'll give you 90% and you've got to come up with the other 10. I'm like, what's that? They said faith, the motion of faith. But as time has gone on, I've started to understand that 10%, it's not an innate faith in us that we haven't found or that the universe won't hand to us on a silver platter. To me, it is the code that we are creating here for the first time in the universal. You can say we're making it up as we go, would be a light way of saying that, but it's that space that where you're what you actually exemplify as well, which is, it's like the laboratory. It's like the alchemic laboratory. It's that space where you're like, oh, it's just me. Okay, let me see what I can do. And again, I think there's a certain, I don't want to say a prerequisite, but almost like a partner in it, and that is what people think.
right.
It's your own space between you and the universe. Here's what I've got. Here's all the code in front of me. Cleaning poop, working in computer science, all this stuff, and then
And
you
it's
go,
all woven together. I
yeah,
mean, there's
and
no
yeah,
hierarchy in it. Nothing's better or worse than
exactly,
anything else. It's
exactly,
just what's
yeah.
in front of you,
It's
kind
it's
of.
it's it's not about the information. I think that's another transition that we're seeing, because the emphasis, or I should say the de-emphasis, and this is a hard one for a lot of people that have been downloading for many, many years, is the de-emphasis of that connection, because that connection is you. And for me, very recently, it's become I am my higher self. Period. End of story. I either am or I'm not. So again, let me. Is there a booklet that tells me, or is there a piece of evidence that shows me this? No, but that's that 10%.
Right.
So I'm comfortably swimming in that field in the initial stages, and I see a lot of people doing it.
And your uniqueness is essential to
Yes.
what's happening.
Yes.
And so the word I've used, I mean, my practice is called co-creating clarity, but that started in 2010, co-creating clarity. Talk about a download, the whole of my website. I wireframed it on paper over a weekend. It was like it all came. And it's a distillation of all of my experience. Because for me, I only want to share something and talk about something when I've lived it. I don't read a book and then talk about it. Now, there are some really important people and books, and I just wanted to mention that because an early on woo-woo persons that were so helpful to me was Lisa Transcendence Brown, because she, talked about a lot of the quantum stuff and so on. That was helpful. Connection into the field, and then Sandra Walter also, because of all of the work she's done. But recently, I mean, your shows have introduced me to people like Franco de Nicola, Jason Estes. I'm not going to mention all the people. Obviously, I've forgotten. I just don't remember a lot of stuff. But all of it has been extremely valuable, and I weave it all together.
Yes.
It's not like I follow one person.
Yes.
I can be listening to Franco and I'll disagree with some things he's saying, but it's weaving. The net is there and everything has its place. And somehow out of that field arises what I'm to do next,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very, very grateful for that. And the books I wanted to mention, I mean, talk about cracking my heart open when my son was born. That was 83. And then the whole systems thinking thing. There was a lot of the space in between, the sense of the unknown was already there, because it was a new territory. And then it was in 91, I think, that I was watching the last 20 minutes of an Oprah show. I told the kids, just be quiet for a little while. I'm going upstairs to ride my bike, and I turned on the TV, and it was Oprah, and she had this woman, Marianne Williamson, on, and she had this bestseller.
That's so weird that you said that, because when
Why?
well, because a minute ago you said something about you were saying that you don't read a book and then go talk about it, but then you gave the books their props, and what immediately popped in my head was Marianne Williamson, who who really initiated a number of books from reading A Course in Miracles. So that to
Right.
me was a really good example of
Through her body, she
yeah.
lived it, and then she wrote this book. And because she was on the show, it was like, I've never seen Oprah so excited. Did you know that that was the first ever show where Oprah gave away a copy of a book to everybody in the audience? Was A Return to Love.
Wow.
And so I caught the last 20 minutes. The next day I went out and I bought Return to Love, and within a week I bought A Course in Miracles. So A Course in Miracles, and
Yeah.
then in 2009, I discovered the continuation of A Course in Miracles called A Course of Love. So you can think about it as A Course in Miracles kind of opens the mind, loosens the hold of the ego mind that's fearful, opens it up into the possibilities of love. And then Course of Love breaks open the heart and brings the heart and mind together, and then what began coming last year, which landed in my lap, and I'm putting it out online, is the third part of the trilogy called The Journey into the Unknown. So I'm putting it out freely online. It's not being published on paper, but the website, Co-Creating Clarity, is the umbrella for all of that.
I think that's the new way. The lady that was on yesterday, and forgive me because I have ascension memory loss too. Beautiful lady. She has 3 books, doesn't charge. And I really feel like that's another pillar of the previous paradigm that's falling, that's affecting, very much so affecting what we would call the light worker community, because there were many things constructed because that's all we had, from the old 3D as we went from 2012 forward, that are beginning to fall, and somewhat painfully. But I think these are going to be, the impetus and the catalyst for massive transformation in a very visual way, and which is why one of the reasons why I put up a little funny meme yesterday that people got very concerned about of the avatar crying.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, about the shadow being the greatest offering. And some people misunderstood it, like Todd's having a bad day. I probably shouldn't have put the avatar that was crying, but it was the higher your soul goes, the more your ass shows,
Right.
which is just Todd Street vernacular, which just basically means that the higher the soul goes, the like everything else, the higher the shadow goes.
Right.
And so
And the more painful it is when those things.
Well, yeah, I think the more painful it is when we resist it. But I think as we go down this road that's in that 10%, we realize, like Peter Pan, right? We realize that this is our partner, right? And so the relationship becomes a little bit different. I mean, this is a wild, crazy, strange ride that we're on. And one other thing I want to say that you bring to light, which is, I'm reminded of a conversation I had a couple of days ago with somebody who sent me what I would call, not to put it in a bad light, but unsolicited advice. There's a lot of awareness becoming into our field about the infringement of energy on ourselves, which wakes us up, and you hear people saying boundaries and boundaries, right? But there's a flip side to that when we infringe on other people's fields. And so I told this person, I really appreciate what you have to say, which was based on what they perceived I was or saying. And I said, we all have a piece really we all have a piece of a piece of a piece of a piece. You know, it's like a piece way down the line, but it is an integral piece, and it's a piece that's created in that 10%, in that space between the lines, that can only be from where we're all at right now, because we are the boots on the ground. You know, so the woo woo's great, the wake up coding is great, but this is where I think it gets really interesting, is when people like you start to bring their piece of a piece of a piece of a piece, which is this long lineage of the original piece combined with the living library of the experiential. And then on the other side of the equal sign is the new code. And you know, for all intents and purposes, heaven on earth.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just what you have inspired me to spit out and explain to myself, which is really all I'm doing. You know.
Right. And it's so interesting that all of that is in A Course of Love. You know, and I don't know if you know anything about these books, but A Course of
I know,
Miracles.
I do know the Course of Miracles. I had the Course of
So
Miracles.
it came through this woman who was a professor at Columbia School of Physicians,
Yeah.
right? A Jewish woman. Well, A Course of Love came through this woman who had just quit her job at the University of Minnesota in adult education program, and she's a Roman Catholic. And the journey into the unknown, which is the third one, came through this man in San Francisco last year, and it's still coming. It's being received every week. Who is a guidance counselor in the school system. So very different people. And he's married. His husband works for a magazine or editor or something, you know, for a magazine. So very different people, all of them bringing through Jesus.
Yeah.
And in this case, A Journey into the Unknown has many, many voices, including contemporary people who passed away in the last few decades, you know. So it's very interesting. But all of it is, it either resonates or it doesn't. What I want to say is that each thing that comes through and the way we do it is appropriate for its time.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why there's a piece of a piece of a piece, because if I look at the Seth Speaks, or you know, some of Shakti Gawan, or some of these people that I was reading in the 80s and the 90s, the relevance has changed because the landscape has changed. But nevertheless, the piece of the piece of the piece of the piece. Like if I look at Marianne Williamson as an example, one of the top 25 books I've ever read in my life, and I've read well over a couple thousand books. I don't really know the exact number, but was called A Woman's Worth. Now, I'm reading A Woman's Worth in the 80s because I've been introduced to A Course in Miracles, and then her first book, but in that book were some of the greatest, you know, quotes and anecdotes and stories. They were the human as the hero stories. They were amazing. And then the insight that she shared as a collaboration with what had awakened code in her, such the Course in Miracles, was fantastic. And some things are timeless, like Rumi and such.
And you just reminded me of something that when I was immersed in the tech world, you know, in getting into leadership and all that. And there was this book, Women's Ways of Leadership or something, and I can't remember the author's name, but she used this metaphor of men's way of leadership being more hierarchical, like stepping up a ladder, and women's ways, she used the spider's web. And I remember loving that, because what she was saying was that it's all about relationship. And the way to succeed is through strengthening relationships, which draws you closer to the center.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was decades ago, you know.
And this is no coincidence, right? You just set up the conclusion of this show. So people have been talking about this octahedron, which is 8, octahedron, New Earth template. You know, we could go into, you know, Morgan and I put a private Zoom session where we went into session and visited it.
Yeah, I watched that.
But there's been other people that have brought it up, and even in the comments and some of these things in her posts, they talk about it. So I'm sitting here over the last couple of weeks during this period when people are bringing this into the field, and this studio has been filling up with spiders. And so the first couple of them, because I'm trying not to harm anything, you know, I grab a tissue. This window doesn't have a screen, open the screen, and I let it go. Then I saw there was more coming. I thought, oh, hell, what the hell? You know, like there's some message that's going to come. And I quickly made the, the association with a spider with 8 legs and an octahedron, but I still didn't understand it. And you've just explained it, because the web looks, what do I want to say? Like it has it doesn't look weak, but it doesn't look like it's, the structural, the constructed, like say in a patriarchal way. In other words, in a very big, strong beams, and you know what I mean? So it looks like something that it's not. But if you look at it, and if I look around at the 4 or 5 different webs in here and see what it's done, it's everything that you just said. And that's a really powerful analogy to me.
And now imagine that infinite web, every dimension, every direction, infinitely, and each of us a little node on that web.
That affects the entire thing.
That's where the power is.
So have you seen the pictures or videos of the cosmos where they have I guess the resolution is such that you actually see the connectivity of what they call the cosmic web, and it looks like spider web. Yeah, it looks like a spider web. It's pretty wild. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I mean, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it ain't there.
Well, that's the space between. That's what it is.
And there's many people that you speak to. I mean, they have their multidimensional vision, which I don't. But they probably can see it. Yeah. It's wonderful.
Well, everyone has a piece of the piece. So what you can see, I can't, and vice versa. I mean, there's a lot of that. But I think we're getting past that whole comparison thing. Oh, she can do this, he can do that.
Right.
People are becoming comfortable in their own skin, and that's what I was referring to earlier, which you exude, which is here's the information, because you have that scientific part of you, right? You say so. Wiping poop all day is information, and the project is information. And so, but you take it all and then you move down the road in awareness of the, like I said, the byways of the connectivity that is the web.
Right.
And you don't look back,
Right. There's meaning in every single thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what's important. That's the invisible stuff that gets woven together. Because I don't like using labels or whatever, but weaving is something I'm doing all the time. My sons get, ticked off sometimes because I'm always connecting. Well, how did you just connect that? Actually, there's a game. I know you want to finish. I could talk for hours. There's a game that I just got for my family, and I have 2 granddaughters. One is 8, one is 5, and they love playing this game. It's picture cards. So there's about, 40 or 50 photographs, but they're not like you can immediately see what it is. Sometimes you can identify parts of it. They're either zoomed in or zoomed out pictures. But the point is to see the patterns, to lay cards down and you have to build cards side by side, connect them. And as long as you can explain the connection, whether it's a color or a pattern or a meaning to you, what are you seeing in it? It's unique to each pair of eyes. It's called Wheezy.
What's it called?
Wheezy. It's spelled
what a 5D game that is.
Yeah, really. It's so much fun.
Hard, a multidimensional. Because that's how it works, right? I mean, you utilize like a muscle, and then it becomes more concrete and more clear.
No one can say what someone sees is wrong.
I never comment on posts or videos or anything, and somebody off that funny meme I put up here say somebody, and bless you, sister, it's all good. She again made an assumption and a comment which really has nothing to do with me. We all know how this works. And I said, because then there was a whole thread of people going da 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 da, and I thought, oh shit, I should have never put this meme up. But so
Yeah.
I put, well, it's funny because these avatar memes are like a piece of art, and that everyone sees something differently. And by the looks of what's happening here, this one's a fucking masterpiece. but you're right. And that's another thing I think that comes with, it's a piece of a piece of a piece of a piece, is at some level, it only makes sense that as we continue to expand, that we start to respect and honor that everyone has a different perspective. And in essence, there's 7.8 billion Earths that we're all walking on. But they're connected in that same space between that you're talking about. And I think that's a huge part of the awareness that's coming in terms of self-respect and mutual respect. So you're amazing. And I don't know why you thought we couldn't talk about anything, because we could. If I didn't have to we could talk a little bit longer. Plus, I got to take a nap because I'm dying, and I got one more show in an hour and 40 minutes. We'll have Yvonne will be on, and she's always interesting, and I'm anxious to see. Today's been a powerful day, and I think that you're a big part of that reason. Thank you for coming on the platform and honoring us with your presence. Congratulations on the grandchildren and your amazing life, and for being who you are, and for doing what you've done. Because as you already know about the connectivity, you've reached consciously, and it seems responsibly, and in honor of yourself and your being with what you do. So I just want to say thanks. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. And it's a moment-to-moment thing. And I want to say that in each moment, I truly feel the giving and receiving as one. It's like love's call, love's answer complete, And I feel that with you. And that's how I try to move through my life, because
you're doing a heck of a job.
So thank you so much.
Take care. All blessings to you and your beautiful family.
You too.
And we'll have to do it again sometime, maybe next year.
Year.
Yeah. And
see, I told you it'd be fun. It was fun, right?
Absolutely. Do you remember who asked who? I think, did I ask you? I think I asked you.
I must have sent you a note at some point saying,
I sent you a thank you, and then I don't know. I just know it was, however it happened, it was very intuitive. It was very spontaneous, very intuitive. Yeah. Anyway, if I did it, you did it, and if you did it, I did it. So what's the difference?
Right. Exactly. Same, giving and receiving as one. So it happened. So great. Thanks.